So, you've played the whole Legacy Collection and you just need more Battle Network. Well, boy oh boy have you come to the right place, because it might have been a well-kept secret, but the Battle Network mobile game is real. And it's not the gacha title that I dream of because I'm a broken shell of a gamer. This is Mega Man Battle Network Phantom of Network. And yes, that is the official localized title, please ignore anything you might see to the contrary. This was originally released for mobile phones in Japan between Battle Networks 4 and 5. No, not like the one that you're watching this video on. Flip phones. And naturally, that means that this game has been lost to time due to obsolete, inaccessible technology and servers shutting down. Or at least it did until this year, when the incredible teams at Scilab Secrets and the Rockman EXE Zone somehow managed to perform heroic feats of technological alchemy to not only discover a piece of hardware with a playable demo of the game, but transmute those files onto a more user-friendly platform and discover that the entire full-length game was actually in there and totally accessible. But wait, there's more. As if all that wasn't enough, the team also created a full English translation patch and fixed a few bugs and oddities around the game to make it even more playable. Now, I of course will be playing an official copy of the game on original hardware, and you will not ask any questions about that or why the game's in English. You will also accept any strange graphical glitches as they are. As a complete non sequitur, it's fascinating that emulating Windows on a MacBook works as well as it does. Hi, I'm Envy Adams, and this is Phantom of Network. You might hear Battle Network flip phone game and assume it's a reskin of Candy Crush or something, which honestly would have been enough for me. But no, this is essentially a fully featured, proper-length Battle Network game actually made by Capcom. And the game throws you right into the action. As soon as Lan heads over to check on Mail's computer going haywire, you're thrown right into some very familiar real-time turn-based tactical action card battling with no tutorial, which I loved because I've been here before and I didn't want to have to wait one more second before getting to play a brand new Battle Network game for the first time in almost 20 years. And everything is exactly as you'd expect it to be. Same 18 tiles, plenty of returning viruses and enemy navis, same classic area grabs, air hockeys, and invises. Honestly, the only things that really feel off at all are that some of the hit detection can be a little bit cringly-crongly, and infuriatingly, viruses can now get invincibility frames the same way navis do, which my muscle memory just never really got used to. And the animations are not quite as clean, but that's something I barely noticed when I was actually playing the game. And there are some unique, cool things about this game too, like the fact that fan-favorite Scuttle-type viruses actually start showing up early on, and bring some unique chips with them for this entry. And maybe kind of a spoiler, but later on in the story, this is actually the only official Battle Network game where you get to fight multiple bosses at the same time on the same battlefield. It's pretty cool. Now, the controls could be a little bit of an issue. Playing on this instead of this was always going to be a less than smooth transition. I'm still waiting for the Atari Jaguar port though. While I was going through the main story, I had to use the default controls on a keyboard, which was actually still pretty playable and really enjoyable, but definitely way more difficult than it needed to be. Thankfully for the side quests and post-game stuff, I did manage to get a controller working, and that turned the experience into something that I genuinely loved. There are still some differences from the controls you're used to in the series. Some buttons do double duty in new ways, other things get split up or relegated into menu options, but it really did feel like the authentic experience. All of the Battle Network magic that you expect from the gameplay is fully present. Outside of combat, this game actually diverges a bit more from the EXE formula you've come to expect. Again, it's a flip phone game. They had to streamline things and cut corners somewhere, but shockingly enough, a lot of those concessions are actually to the game's benefit. Instead of running back and forth across large IRL overworlds for every scenario, this game uses a Phoenix Wright style navigation menu for moving around and jacking in. You never actually directly control land in this one. And the internet overworlds are definitely a bit smaller and more sparse than their GBA counterparts, but I don't mind that at all. After a certain point, these places turn into slogging retreads, and cutting that down actually makes the game feel super playable with an almost arcadey appeal. Like the fetch quests that send you from AC/DC 2 to Dan Area 3 and then into the Undernet just feel way less annoying and overwhelming on this scale. Plus, Phantom of Network has pretty unique visuals for the net, with a much more Flash game aesthetic, which I'd really get a kick out of, and frankly fits the past version of the future vibes of Battle Network really well. Instead of the Navi customizer, there's a much more streamlined skills editor, which I loved for the new programs it introduced, like one to attract Navi ghost encounters more frequently, and also for how quick and easy this system makes changing programs back and forth. And for some reason, of all the games in the continuity, this is the one where every random computer system in the world actually has a unique design and shape to fit the item instead of just being a generic square. Like Mail's bear-shaped stuffed bear comp, or the bracket-shaped tournament computer. This actually rules. And backing up to something I started to say about Mail earlier, the game's story begins when she asks Lan to come check out her malfunctioning PC. When you reach the end of that system, there's a floating white orb that turns into a very angry fireman.exe. Glitches with the school's water system and a security breach at a net battle tournament lead to similar endings, this time fighting Iceman and Woodman, respectively. But Froy and the real Iceman are present during that encounter, revealing that our worst nightmare has come true. These aren't rogue Navis, these are ghosts of the internet. These are phantoms of the network. I'm gonna go through the whole story here, so if you do plan to play this game, which I highly recommend, and you don't want spoilers, then skip ahead to this timestamp right here. Next, Lan and Mail finally go on a date to a magic show, and the power goes out and things go off the rails there too. It seems like another ghastly incident, but this dungeon ends with a proper Navi instead of an ethereal sphere. Turns out that Lan's new friend Shuichi, son of the famed illusionist Mr. Hat, went rogue on his own to try and get his dad's attention for once, which I thought was a fun little misdirect, and also kind of drew a parallel to how Lan has to risk his life trying to save the world in order to get any actual FaceTime with Yuichiro. And speaking of absent fathers, the next scenario has Sho's dad's company, IPC, the producer of PETs, being targeted for a cyber attack. Naturally, Lan and Sho team up to take down the spectral Shadowman.exe behind it, who really seemed to have something against PETs. Throughout all of this, some breadcrumbs have been dropped about what's actually behind all this E-haunting. Thanks to Proto-Man cutting off a piece of Woodman's data and Shuichi getting some help with his heist from some seedy Undernet type dudes, Lan's dad can finally pin down that cache data is the source of all these specters in the cyberspace. These phantoms of network. Now, cache data is essentially just backup data stored on the network to make things quicker and easier for us. Your real actual web browser in our human world has a cache to load web pages faster. Anyway, another lead from Shuichi and an unsavory detour to the Undernet point us to the true source of all this cache data. The mobile area, a place that you can only jack into from a mobile device, which is why it's not on the official's radar. How unique for this particular entry. There's signal jamming making this area difficult to access, but luckily Lan and Mega Man's unbreakable bond lets us Deus Ex Machina our way right on through to encounter Jamming Man, who tragically does not look like this and is actually more of a weird dog thing. After defeating him, we finally find where the source of the cache data is by chasing Drill Man through the Cyber Hole comp. I don't even have a joke for that, that's just what stuff is called in this game. And the true culprit is finally revealed. Cache, who is cache data given sentience through the pure power of hatred. But Cache overwhelms us with legions of cache data navis, so the final battle is postponed for the moment. But after rallying a team of net battlers to help distract all those phantoms of the network, protecting Cache themselves, it's time. Cache is hiding on a server in an abandoned lab, and Papa Hikari tells us that Dr. Wily was the one who kept this server running even after the lab shut down, though it's not clear if he knew or wanted all this to happen. Now, Operation Mobile is ready to roll. It's finally time to kick Cache's butt. After the boss rush you should have come to expect by now, everything ends with, in my opinion, one of the coolest and most difficult final boss fights in the entire series. And the only official Battle Network encounters where you fight two Navis at once. kinda. The patterns might seem simple enough, but it's difficult to execute in real time, especially with the default keyboard controls. To cap things off, we learn that Cash was driven to lash out at the world because of how cache data is forgotten, taken for granted, and consumed by people. But maybe, just maybe, strong bonds between operator and Navi can help change that strained relationship in the future, and everyone lives happily ever after. But, of course, that's not really the end. You know I could never take a Battle Network game seriously if there was no post-game. First, I want to explain how this game was originally released. Every 2 weeks, a single scenario or chapter was made available for paid subscribers to the game. In between new chapter releases, there were also BBS requests which could be taken on, but these were purchased individually with in-game currency. This makes each block of BBS requests essentially a mini post-game for its respective episode of the story, meant to fill time while waiting for the next update. However, this dingus waited until finishing the main story to play through any of the 63 requests, which is not the approach I would recommend. Most requests are some variation on the basic themes of find a guy and then fight a virus, or find a guy and then find another guy. And doing so many back-to-back can get a little monotonous. But the game's main story doesn't actually involve a ton of running around and exploring the net, so when paced appropriately, the BBS requests do a really good job of fleshing out that piece of the experience. And the rewards tend to be really good, like HP memories, valuable mega chips, and rare skill editor programs. So it ends up being a good thing that the average side quest here is simple, especially with so many to work through. More than in any of the mainline games. And there are a few recurring requesters with their own little story arcs who give you multiple tasks spaced out through the jobs. I actually got a real kick out of some of these zany characters, situations, and conversations. Most of these end with Lan and Mega Man having some snarky commentary about whoever they just helped out, and I would say that that was pure distilled Mega Man Battle Network charm. My favorite of the bunch was definitely this freak who's fallen madly in love with a woman he's never spoken to and tries to use Lan to flirt by proxy. You can imagine how that goes. And the very last series of BBS postings is only accessible after completing the main story, so technically, this is post-game content. But surprisingly enough, the request board is the only thing the post-game actually requires you to 100% complete in order to see all the content. You need most of the standard and mega chips to see the full secret area, but nothing is gated behind all of them other than the title screen icons. Which is another thing I appreciated about this game when thinking back to how long it took to get my final chip drops in Battle Network 1 or 6. The scaled down size of everything made the grind toward 100% feel so much more attainable. 123 standard chips isn't that many, and I was accidentally most of the way there by the time I finished the main story. This smaller library made me experiment with my folder more and get out of my comfort zone a little, since it was so hard to make a decent folder without at least 2 chip codes. A smaller pool of chips means that each code contains fewer options too, and that meant I had to get creative with some of the more difficult fights. And yes, it is called the secret area this time, but unfortunately, we're not back in Battle Network 3's heavenly hidden realm. This time it's a little more like the Matrix? But like a forgotten Newgrounds cartoon version. It's far from the most fully featured post-game zone in the series, but frankly, I was impressed by the fact that there was one at all. And there is fun to be had here. This is where the rematches with the SP forms of the final boss are at, and this is where all of the Giga Chips in this game are obtained. And they are worth the effort. I was legitimately surprised the first time I stumbled into the base fight here. There was more personality and spark put in than I expected. It might sound like I'm a little lukewarm on this post game, but the whole saga of finishing the BBS and conquering the secret area was what really made me fall in love with this game. In other games in this series, full completion definitely unlocks more content than it does in this game, and most of those are superior 100% experiences. But in Phantom of Network, I felt a drive to collect everything for its own sake, almost as a way of saying thank you and paying tribute to a game that I still can't believe actually exists and I'm getting to play. This game is without question better than Battle Network 1 or 4, both in terms of playing the main story or going for 100%. If you still ride or die for Battle Network, do not miss this one. I didn't realize how much I missed running around and having a new adventure in this nostalgic little world until I actually got to, and you might just experience the same thing. A huge thanks again to Scilab Secrets and the Rockman EXE Zone for making this project a reality, and of course to Rockman Corner for keeping me updated every step of the way. And I have great news. There's another one. Mega Man Battle Network Legend of Network is another fully featured entry on the same Japanese cell phones, with the unique distinction of being released after Battle Network 6. That's right, the last traditional Battle Network game ever released was a flip phone exclusive that you'd probably never heard about until right now. But I'm going to be streaming my first playthrough of that game starting tonight, so subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and all that good stuff so you can come through, hang out, and experience the true end of the series with me. And hey, thank you so much for listening to my thoughts on Phantom of Network. And stay tuned, I'm trying to cover every single Battle Network spinoff. Check out these ones I've already done, and I'll hopefully be back sooner next time, so till then.